Okay, we just been through the old style 3 kata, 50 techniques, and what we want to do is take these techniques and use them as a training tool rather than a kata. It's easy to people to make the mistake of going through kata, just going through a motion without ever feeling the attack or really feeling the attacker or understanding the technique. But we're going to use this as a training tool to apply the principles of Aikido. And we're going to use what-if situations. What if someone resists you a certain way or attacks slightly different, or they don't react properly for the kata technique? What do you do? So we're going to take some of the techniques, starting with a couple of sitting techniques, and then we'll move on through some other parts of the techniques of those 50 kata techniques. So let's start with the first one, the attack, and we'll go slightly different. We'll start the technique and then how to vary that technique. Okay. Here, first is get the person off balance in all cases. At this point, I've got him in a position where I can shift techniques now. I can either continue my push down, or I can now change into a different application. By reaching in and taking this technique, I can come into an application of the wrist twist technique, or I can pull down, turning to an elbow technique. So you can see just from one move how to vary that technique. Suppose your attacker changes his attack slightly. He begins to counter you and try to counter your movement. For instance, he attacks, and I start here, and he pulls down and grabs my arm some way. In this case, it becomes a different technique. Now you have to apply a principle. Which one? By doing this, I can come into the wrist lock technique, or if he attacks again and he grabs again, I may shift this technique down and come over with this technique. Always, if you notice, his balance was broken at that point. I moved his balance. Another application would be the grabbing, where someone grabs both arms. And I've seen in the kata, someone on top of you this way, they go ahead and use their body to force this technique up. I was taught, don't go against force. If someone's really fighting you with force, don't go against it trying to use your strength. Go with their force. So when he gets up, then I begin to change techniques. Here, to this, or possibly another variation here, using an elbow lock technique. But vary that technique. Don't go forcing something when someone is resisting you. Another possible technique, he's the same way, coming on top of me and resisting. Here, and I start to pull down here. I drop that just enough to get the pressure where I want it. And then I have him in the control technique. These are just some variations of these techniques. And now I'm going to let Mike and David, using the same thinking, take some techniques and try varying the principles against resistance. Okay, what I want you to do is David will attack Mike with the strike, and Mike can vary his technique or try countering resistance. Okay. Okay, that was using a wrist technique coming out instead of an elbow. Once more, David, I want you to resist some in this case. Okay. Countering resistance. And okay, and this, let's let Mike attack David, do the same type of attack. Okay. Shifting to a wrist technique again. And countering with some resistance. It can be any type of resistance. Okay, good. Okay, we've seen 4 different types of resistance, 4 different techniques used in the different resistances. How about the grabbing both hands? And let's let David grab Mike first. Okay. Try something else. Whatever, when you're doing these, you should be feeling your attacker. Feel his attack, resistance, and go with that technique that best suits that resistance. Okay. All right. David. And Michael attacked David this time. Okay. Okay. All right, there was 4 different techniques again applied out of those 4 movements. Take some of the standing or tachiwaza techniques and do them the same way we did the sitting techniques. We'll start with the basic kata and then go to some what-if situations or applications of it. First we'll start with the first technique in the standing techniques, and we'll go through the kata first. So if Mike will attack me. Now, this is the kata portion of the technique. Now, to change this a little bit, people don't always do the same thing. When you're doing kata, the person is not reacting, doesn't do exactly the way he should have done for your kata. Generally in a demonstration, people go ahead and do their kata and try to go through it the same way. But then it's not going to look right. Sometimes it's better to go ahead and do something different that works and looks right than it is just to try to do your kata. But we're going to go ahead and do what-ifs. In this case, suppose I start my technique and somebody throws a hand up and blocks my hand as I counter move on his first counter attack. He'll come up here. He has caught my arm in a different position now. This is a counter move. In this case, what would I do? Stop. Let's take it from a starting point again. He grabs here. At this point, I could come over to this type of wrist technique, bring him down, maybe change to this pull-down technique. This is one variation or application I could use. Let's try again. Here I could also move in another way. Suppose he's pulling back a little bit or something. Here, I could use this technique. There's many variations you could use on this movement when someone tries to counter you or doesn't do exactly what you thought they were going to do. Let's take the second technique also and start the kata first. He grabs my wrist, here, attack. So this is kata. Now, in reality, if someone grabs your wrist and you hit him, he's probably going to turn this loose and possibly turn that loose real fast when a fist comes at his face. Or he's going to counter your hand some way. More likely he may counter your hand here. This presents the similar technique you had in number 1 where he caught your wrist. You can come over here and use a wrist technique, or you can come under here, catch this wrist as you come under it so he won't turn you loose. Now I've got him. I can do the same basic move here and still do the same type of kata or similar to your kata move. but from a different motion. Suppose I come under this arm and he turns it loose. Then what happens? I can grab it as he turns loose. Then I could shift back to another technique. So be ready for any type of reaction or abnormal situation when somebody's doing kata. So when you go through your kata, try to make it realistic. In kata, it looks better if he's grabbing like he's really attacking. When you punch, he may counter this move a little bit, but come on under. Then, here, come back to your position. A kata where somebody just floats through it, going through their movements without considering, okay, it doesn't look right. It looks more like this. Doesn't quite look realistic. Might look pretty, but not realistic. So the more realistic you can make your kata training, the better it is for actual martial art training. Okay, I want to let some of these guys try the same motions we were doing and see. They'll probably come up with various techniques, but let them try the same thing. Okay, Mike and Doc are going to try to apply some of the same principles or training method I was just explaining that I was doing, and they're going to do the same thing starting with the same two techniques, the first and second techniques of Tachiwaza, or the standing techniques. So starting off, I'll let Doc attack Mike on number 1, and he can do resistance or countering and try other techniques varying off of your basic kata technique. They're not going to do the basic kata, they're going to do the counter movement. So Doc, if you'll attack Mike, and we'll see what kind of techniques come up here. Okay, pull down or elbow lock. This is a variation of the same wrist twist technique used in the basic kata. One more application. Okay, another variation. Okay, Doc and Mike are going to do the second technique in the standing kata. I'm going to let Mike attack Doc this time. He's not going to really go through the kata part, but complete kata, but just from the beginning, starting the kata and then vary it based on Mike's resistance. So go ahead, Mike will attack Doc, and he's going to try to do some counter movements. Okay, one use of a wrist twist technique. A wrist turn. Okay, that was a different resistance. Starting one wrist move, turn, he resisted and reversed it into another throw. So that was 3 different movements from the same starting point. Okay, now we're going to take some of the knife techniques. Out of the 8 knife techniques, we'll take 2 or 3 of the techniques and go from the kata into variations or what-if situations on those also. We'll start with the 3rd technique in the knife series, which is your reverse attacking, and I'll do the kata first. Okay. That's the basic kata. But what if situations? Suppose someone resists you some way in strength, and he starts resisting this point. Now at this point I can't pull him down the same way, so I've got to change my motion or technique. By going with what I feel in his resistance, I can use something like that, which was combining elbow and wrist technique, or balance and wrist technique again. And other possibilities. just some variations when someone comes down strong with their arm. This is the possibility of the thing you may run into. Let's take another technique from the side. This is the, let's see, 1, 2. This is the 5th technique, I believe. I'm trying to think numbers here, but number 5, he comes up under the ribs with a knife. The kata part. Okay. The basic kata. It's easy when you're doing kata sometimes to just go floating through your technique, which again, I've said before, but if someone comes at you and you just go right into your technique, if he comes at me and I'm automatically just going through my technique, I start into it without thinking, just go to it. Sometimes this will mess you up if the person doesn't react properly. So the first thing you want to do is counter that move. In any case, this is your first move, the counter. Maybe hit. Then you're ready to take him off balance. This works better because you're not sure. When somebody's fixing to attack, in reality, don't think kata, but reality. He's standing there with a knife. I'm not sure how he's going to attack. It could be any way. There, face, straight, slash, whatever. So I've got to be ready to counter that move. So when he does come into the side here, my first move is to counter it. Then my movement. My first movement may counter, maybe counter punch, then grab this arm and go to my technique. Now here's resistance. He may pull back like he is right now. If he is, I can use that wrist the same way against him. Again. Okay. His resistance is bringing me to the same point again. So this case is pretty much the same. This case, which was you couldn't see from the side, camera side, but I'll try to do it from this side if I can do the same thing again. When he resisted here, coming back with a wrist technique. Those are just variations of things you can do with this same knife movement. Another movement is someone had in the 7th technique where he has his knife inside the coat and he comes up and realizes who you are. The situation is 2 people walking toward each other and suddenly he realizes who you are and he pulls a knife. The basic kata is balance here and take down. In looking at that kata, as I go into that move, let's do the same type of attack. He comes up, starts his move, and he starts here. When I do this, get his balance and start under, I'm in a weak position here. Let's turn from this side. Same thing as from this position. No, go ahead and come up closer. He's here. I try to break balance, come under here. I'm in a position of being cut, possibly. So there's a possibility in this technique if you can get cut. What if he comes up with that knife and does the same thing? Other possibilities. He's here. Instead of just going into here, use a variation of this move. Catching here is one possibility. Or he's up here. Slightly different movements and techniques from the same starting point of your kata, but changing your techniques. This is what I wanted to get at of using these as training tools, where the same starting point, but change your method of attack or resistance. Change your techniques a little bit. Now I want to let them try some of these techniques, and I'll let maybe David and Mike start on this one. Okay, Mike and David are going to do some what-ifs or variations of these kata, knife katas again, starting with the 3rd technique, and David's going to attack Mike, and Mike will do some variations based on David's resistance. So go ahead. Okay. One resistance ended up with a wrist turn, Kotegaeshi application. Okay, ended up in an elbow or forearm turn on that one. One more. Kotegaeshi again, that's okay. Good. The resistance brings the person into the technique. Okay, I want, we'll change, and Mike is going to attack David with the fifth technique, which is coming in under the ribs, and David will do some variations based on Mike's resistance. Okay. Okay. That was, couldn't see that, but it was a wrist lock technique. Okay, a wrist lock technique. Okay, another wrist lock. It's an elbow locking technique. Okay, that's good. In each case, Mike was resisting the move and shifted techniques on it. Okay, okay, we're going to take the bow or stick techniques and do similar what-if situations. We'll take the kata first, and then do just a one or two. What if somebody resists you or tries to counter your move? Let's take the first one, which is a reverse move. He comes in. I'll do the kata first. Okay, the basic kata is a reverse attack. Suppose he counters that attack some way. Okay, he's countered with a stick. Let's do that again. Okay. I'm not sure you can see what happened, but I'll do it slow and try to do it slow and see what happens here. Once more. One. He counters. As he counters, this arm is extended. Come up under the arm. It is locked against the stick now. So by coming up against the elbow, it's a throw technique. Let's take another one. Same type move. He pulls back and down. Again, his arm is extended because he's pulled away. I can come up and use a similar elbow throw from a different locking position. Okay, let's take a number 2 attack in the kata. We'll do the kata first. It's a frontal attack. But let's say he counters it again. Okay, this time he's using a hand to block me with, which leaves me having to use something else. So I'm going to turn around and do this a different side because from what I'm fixing to do couldn't be seen. So he'll do the same block. Here he's around. Now I'm going to use the elbow again, but I'm going to come around and catch it this way. By using a reverse elbow catch across his elbow, I was able to bring him forward. His hand is locked on the stick. Once more. Slow. Here. His arm now is extended because of his movement. This elbow becomes weak. Lock it with my arm. And then shift. This time I'm shifting a little different to the wrist technique. Okay. So you can see variations, how to use these basic starting points, use some resistance and counter moves, and then go to a different application of your principles. Okay, I want to have maybe Mike and Doc try some of the same movements. okay, I want to have Mike and Doc do the similar movements or whatever they come up with on these same attack techniques. Doc's going to attack Mike with the first kata movement, and then he's going to counter that reverse attack, and Mike will have to come up with some techniques. So Doc will be the attacker. Okay. So reverse balance throw. Okay, another balance throw. In both case using the stick to throw him with. Mike attack Doc this time, and they'll use the second technique in this kata, which is the forward attack. So. Okay, that was a wrist locking counter. Okay, using an arm lock and bring him off balance and throw with the stick. Okay, those are two more techniques, two different techniques. That was good. Two techniques out of the first 5 stick techniques or bow techniques. We did it on the defensive side where someone's coming at you with a stick and you counter, they counter your counter, and then you go into a technique. When you get into the next 8 techniques, you're actually using the spear or bow or stick against a person. For the first kata example, come this way just a little bit. If I attack Mike and I'm going to use a stick, no, let's do the kata, basic kata. Come on this way a little bit more. In this case, I use a stick, he grabs it, and I throw it. And they do these techniques, variations of different, him grabbing the stick and me throwing him different ways. If you go back to the first 5, that was using techniques to counter someone at the stick. So let's say he uses technique number 2 to counter me on this same movement. Here, now, this comes back. You see the relationship between the 5 and this one. One said you're defending, next time you're using the stick, but the same thing can happen to you when you use the stick. So in this case, here, now I can counter him again using this and actually apply principle back in the opposite direction. Using the stick, he counters, I apply a counter movement. So you can see the relationship of all the techniques back and forth, how you can use these principles, whether attacking, defending, using a weapon, not using a weapon. They all relate to each other. They all work together. We've taken a few of the techniques out of Old Style 3 and used them as in what-if situations or as training tools in how to use these to make up new techniques or show what to do in case someone resists you or attacks slightly differently. When I was training under Mr. Tomiki and Mr. Ohba, all of these techniques were taught as applications of the 15 basics which he was teaching at that time. The 15 basics represents the core or nucleus of the principles of Aikido according to Mr. Tomiki in his book Judo and Aikido. And I believe if you understand these 15 basics that he taught as basic principles, then you can see the relationship in all of these techniques in the old style kata. When we learned these techniques, we learned them individually. They were not in sets at that time. So we did not learn them as a set of old style techniques, but as applications. That way we could see the relationship between each of these techniques and those basic principles or 15 techniques he was teaching. So I hope in looking at this you'll understand some of the relationship in the techniques. We have a tape out that demonstrates the 15 basic and goes into detail and training on those and the basic principles, which would help you understand what we're doing in this state.